Hi everyone, welcome to the second week on youth work ethics as part of youth work theory and prac. This week we're going to be focusing on debates and dilemmas. In this video I'm going to point you towards some tools, some resources so you can engage in those debates around the dilemmas within youth work ethics, but I'm also going to point out a key dilemma about whether we should professionalise as youth workers. Okay, my little disclaimer at the top is that I'm involved in an organisation called Youth Work SA, which has created and is about rolling out a youth work code of ethics for South Australia. So that colours my perspective, but I can appreciate both sides of this argument. In fact, I have friends who fall on both sides of it. So let me try and summarise it quickly for you now. Obviously I'm going to miss some bits, but let's give you a quick summary. So I have one friend who's on the for side. He stood up in a conference for youth workers. It was during a debate and he was on the panel for whether we should have a code of ethics or not, and he said it's a no-brainer. We should really get on and do this. And the argument for basically says that youth work needs a strong identity to protect what is unique and what is distinct about youth work practice. So creating some boundaries around that protects the youth work as a profession. It protects individual youth workers, but it also protects young people to give some guidance around ethical behaviour in youth work. So that's the argument for. The argument against, I have a friend who falls into this side as well, and he thinks, along with others, that actually having frameworks and regulation around this separates youth work from something of its core relational ideas and underpinnings. So a youth code of ethics in their perspective are too general anyway. If you have this broad code of ethics, it can't actually give you specific guidance on your situation. So is it useful? But also ask questions about instituting and regulating youth work. And the argument goes that it creates a hierarchy within the profession and that there is some institutionalized inequality as a result. Basically what they're saying is if you have a regulation, if you have codes of ethics, somebody has to be a gatekeeper about that, has to say who's in and who's out, and that marginalizes some people in some kind of work. And regulation itself seems actually quite counter to the inclusive and educative work of youth work. Okay, so they're the kind of two sides of this debate. There are ways to perhaps overcome some of these issues, and Youth Work SA, the organisation I'm involved in, is trying to actually bridge some of these dilemmas. So the idea here that Youth Work SA is trying to embody is that youth work ethics, codes of ethics, aren't actually the profession itself. Youth work ethics put down on paper a professional commitment that the youth worker has already made. So that's what is the profession, is the commitment, the work that youth workers are doing. Codes of ethics are supposed to support that. And the way that Youth Work SA is trying to support that is to have an educative and a restorative conversation rather than a regulatory role in that space. I'll talk some more about that in a minute, but you should also know that this is a much broader conversation than just South Australia. So there are professional associations in other states. There's one in Victoria, there's one in Western Australia, and there's something more like a network in Queensland. And I'm sure there's some others around the place too, but there's a few that you should be aware of. Likewise, there's some peak bodies for youth affairs in different states, and there's been a national one in the past. There's one in South Australia called YACSA, there's one in WA and Victoria as well, and their role typically is about promoting and advocating for youth affairs, not necessarily for youth workers. And that distinction is really quite important. So in South Australia, we've actually had a youth affairs council, YACSA, for many years, in about the 1980s that they were set up, but we haven't had a professional body for youth workers who are specifically designed to advocate for youth workers. So that's where Youth Work SA comes in. Their idea, and they were launched in 2016, was to create an association which is inclusive of practitioners, as well as educators, managers and academics. And the idea is to include training providers as well as service providers in that, in something that promotes solidarity and continuous learning about youth work and ethics within South Australia. So it's less about policing and regulating people's behaviour and more about encouraging a conversation which lifts the level of understanding in South Australia collectively. Alright, so I want you to go and check out Youth Work SA's website, and I want you to go and check out their code of ethics, and I want you to consider whether you want to become a member of that organisation. If you're a student now, it's a good idea to join before you graduate because it's cheaper for you at the moment. So do check that out. They have a code of ethics there which you can download for free. And it's based on what is sometimes described as the Fairbridge Code, which comes from Western Australia. So if you look at those two codes together, you'll find there's a lot of similarities. Whether you agree or disagree with professionalisation of youth work, you need to have some vocabulary to articulate your position. So check out those codes as a way of gaining that language to articulate position. But also check out the alternative as well. If you agree, check out the alternative of against, and there you'll find a resource that I put in for this week as well that puts an argument out against professionalisation in youth work. So arm yourself with vocabulary so that you can articulate your position. Defend your position and know what the implications of it are, and know what you believe and why. That's my challenge for you. So the question I'm going to leave you with for this week for you to consider, after you've read those codes, can you now articulate your ethics? Do you know how to work through ethical dilemmas? Do you have a process for that? And what resources can you draw on to help you through that process?